The climate extremes that are affecting the Amazon are a big issue. People from other countries often miss how much life is getting hard in the Amazon. It's been a few years that we are experiencing a very extreme drought with dry rivers and all the social consequences behind it. And then in the same regions, just a few months after, we are experiencing like extreme floods. People living in the areas of the Amazon are trapped between two emergencies. It's not just an environmental issue, but it's something that is affecting millions of people in the Amazon. A few cases from my last report on drought that was in November in Tefé, one of the most affected regions in the Brazilian Amazon by extreme heat, was there. And I met a family that was coming from a remote village, and it took like 15 hours to make it from their village to the nearest bank. And that was just to withdraw some basic emergency aid that the government was providing during the drought. These people are leaving their villages. They pay up front a lot of gas just to take a few dollars. These families are being vulnerabilized a lot by the current climate crisis, and their societies are somehow eroding. They are getting increasingly underpaid, and they are left to territories where the state control is poor, and sometimes the organized crimes can get in. The climate crisis in the Brazilian Amazon is getting people away from the small villages, and somehow it will impact even more the environmental and humanitarian issues of the region. Most of the people in the Amazon, they are a sort of sustainable extractivists. So they are based on some fishing together with some kind of bioeconomy products that they can sell in the nearest cities. So it's a sort of economy with no or few money involved. The people in the Amazon live with very few to none infrastructure and social welfare. So there are people basically abandoned by their government because it's a very vast territory that it's so hard to make things work in such remote villages. I've been to several places that somehow resemble me a sort of desert. And for example, in the so-called arc of deforestation, the landscape there is mostly unpaved roads, a lot of cattle, some cowboy. It's almost like a Western movies. Last year, in documenting the drought in the Amazon state, and I was walking basically for almost an hour on top of a desertic island that wasn't supposed to be there, because it's like the riverbed of the Solimões River, that in some points of the river during the drought is going so low that new islands are appearing. And there's nothing on top, but it's pretty impressive because it's really a desert in the Amazon, basically. Of course, you are never safe when you are trying to create evidence of illegal activities, and especially the risk is doubled when you are working in remote region. And I would say that early in my career, I was pushing my boundaries because I was in need of somehow creating my first evidence and experiencing what was happening in the Amazon, what was wrong in specific regions. I dedicated quite a lot of my time to documenting illegal gold mining inside indigenous territories. And I've been even into gold mines that were controlled by drug traffickers. I came very near to risk, but I managed to return. I always knew that being a father would make me more vulnerable in that kind of choices, because you are more like free to take your risk with no responsibilities. And as a father, I feel like I owe my presence and my guidance to my son, at least for as much as I can. I'm not trying to take at any cost new evidences of what's happening, because I think everybody knows that there's illegal ranching, illegal gold mining in the Amazon. So I'm trying to build more long narratives that could be useful to building stories and maybe lead to some change in the future, at least in my communities. In my career, this is the first chance that I got of just living a territory and call it home for a decade. And I think this is where I will spend the rest of my life. So I'm building a sort of desire to build a legacy of what could be done in the region. I don't feel I'm an activist, but I think that photography is still a strong way to tell something and push for changes. I'm working a lot on the COP30 because, of course, it's for international interest. So all the magazines are coming here and we're collaborating in a series of pieces related to the impact of COP30, even on the urban communities of the Amazon, like Belém. There's a real disconnect. We were in the local Vero Peso. This is like the largest open air market in Latin America, where all fishermen and fruit sellers have their stalls. And we were speaking to this lady, and she was super enthusiastic about the COP. So she was so happy, telling that there would be thousands of people going there, spending money. And I was intrigued by her enthusiasm, but then I understood that COP30, COP in Brazilian sounds a bit like Copa, that is like the World Cup. So the reality is she was thinking that COP30 was like the World Cup, and that would have been happening in Belém. The city is being dressed for the event. It's full of renovation, new infrastructure being built to receive the world leaders and to make a good appearance on the international scale. But I think we are missing the part where dialogue and participation comes in. I think that indigenous people all over the world are making great work to call international attention on top of very important topics. But for example, even if this conference would be something extremely positive on paper, I think that what is at risk is that on first, they will not be heard in reality. I mean, they will be used as a sort of symbol to feel like their policies and their countries are green. So it's a sort of contemporary greenwashing on top of traditional cultures. When other governments want to help indigenous community, this kind of aid always pass through governments. And that's where 90% of the funds will get lost at some point. So there's a lot of middleman corruption that never reach the people who are in need. This COP would be an opportunity to find a new strategy, to find a new way to transfer international funding and support directly to cooperatives or communities. COP30 will bring even more support to the local populations, but they need to find a way to make it more transparent and more direct. I recognize that Europe and other wealthy nations build their economies on top of extraction, predatory extraction in their territories, and also when they end their resources violently on the global south. I always think, even before this kind of conversation arise, and when I start thinking about my solutions for the Amazon, that wealthy nations should pay for what they are now asking to the global south. Like Europe was covered in forest, and it has been transformed somehow, no, in huge wealth along centuries. And now they're asking, when we are reaching a sort of global stall, do not let emerging countries do the same. Maybe restore a bit the imbalance between the two. If wealthy nation will accept, and I think they should, to fund an energy transition or a climate transition, they need for sure to listen to the local communities. The real challenge would be to adopt a fair transition that passes even through compensation. Think about a new paradigm shift and rebalance power and move towards real cooperation on another form.